Just before dawn on a Bangkok road, a police officer lay dying. His motorbike was wrecked, and leading away from his body, down the street and around a corner, was a long trail of oil and brake fluid, the trail his own killer's car had left behind. The police followed it. It led them, within minutes, to the gates of a mansion belonging to one of the richest families in the country. More than a decade has passed since that morning. The man police say was behind the wheel has been named. He's been charged. Interpol has listed him as wanted across the world, and in all that time, he has not spent a single night in a prison cell. How does a man accused of killing a police officer stay free for over a decade? The answer is this case, a case so notorious in Thailand that it gave new life to an old bitter saying, "Only the poor go to jail." Here's what police alleged he was doing that morning. Driving a Ferrari at 177 kilometers an hour on a road with an 80-kilometer limit. Here's what he did after, according to the case against him. He drove home, and eventually he fled the country on a private jet, days before he was due in court. Most of the charges against him quietly expired, one by one, as the years ran out. And then in 2025, something almost unheard of happened. People actually went to prison over this case, just not him. Before we go further, one thing has to be absolutely clear, and we will hold to it for the entire video. The man at the center of this has never been convicted of anything. Every allegation about his speed, his actions, what was in his blood, all of it remains exactly that, an allegation tested in no court because he has never stood in one. What follows is the public record, as reported by outlets like the Associated Press, the ABC, and Thailand's own press, and the findings of the courts that have ruled. Where the record says, police allege, or prosecutors say, so do we. So let's go back to the beginning. The date was the 3rd of September, 2012. In the early hours of the morning, on Sukhumvit Road, one of the main arteries of Bangkok, a 50-something Ferrari was traveling at high speed. The victim was a serving traffic police officer, Police Sgt Maj Wichian Klanprasert. He was 47 years old. He was on his motorcycle, doing his job. And according to police, the Ferrari struck the back of his bike without stopping. The officer was thrown from the motorbike. Police said his body was dragged a considerable distance down the road. He died there, at the scene, in the dark, doing ordinary police work on an ordinary night. The car did not stop, but it left evidence. Police followed that trail of leaking fluid off the main road and onto a nearby side street, and it led them straight to the luxury compound of the Yoovidhya family, one of the wealthiest families in all of Thailand. To understand the shockwave this case would send through the country, you have to understand who that family is. The Yoovidhyas are the family behind Red Bull. The grandfather, the late Chaleo Yoovidhya, was one of the co-creators of the energy drink that became a global empire. Forbes has listed the family as the richest in Thailand, with a fortune estimated in the tens of billions of dollars. This was not an anonymous driver. The trail led to one of the most powerful dynasties in the nation. The man police identified as the driver was Vorayuth Yoovidhya, known by his nickname, Boss. He was Chaleo's grandson. At the time, he was 27 years old, young, immensely wealthy, and heir to a global fortune. In the hours after the crash, he was arrested. And then, almost immediately, the machinery that would define this entire saga began to turn. He was granted bail. According to reporting, his father paid it, a sum that, to a family worth billions, was pocket change, and Vorayuth walked back out. That early release in itself set the tone for everything that followed. In many countries, a fatal hit-and-run involving alleged extreme speed would see a suspect held while the most serious questions were resolved. Here, within hours, the accused was back in the family compound. To be clear, bail is a normal and legitimate part of any justice system, and being granted it is not evidence of anything improper. But context matters to how the public reads a case, and the context here was stark. An ordinary Thai facing the same allegations would rarely have the means to post bail so effortlessly, let alone the resources to mount the years of legal maneuvering that were to come. From the very first morning, the case became a mirror in which the country saw the difference that money and connections make, and it would only grow sharper with time. Police laid out a serious case. They alleged the Ferrari had been traveling at 177 kilometers per hour. They said blood tests taken after the crash showed traces of alcohol and cocaine in his system, though we note carefully that no drug charge was ever proven against him in court, and that allegation, like the others, was never adjudicated. In total, he was eventually facing several criminal counts: speeding, failing to stop and help after an accident, a hit and run, and most serious of all, reckless driving causing death. And then began the part of the story that turned a tragedy into a national scandal, the disappearing act. Over the years that followed, Vorayuth was summoned to face the process again and again, and again and again he did not appear. His lawyers cited reasons. He was ill, he was overseas on business, he was being treated unfairly. The dates came, and the dates passed. One postponement became another, months became years. To ordinary Thais watching, it looked less like a legal process and more like a wealthy young man being allowed, politely and indefinitely, to simply not show up. A poor man who killed a police officer, the public understood instinctively, would not be granted delay after delay. He would be in a cell. The pattern reached its breaking point in 2017. That April, prosecutors issued a summons ordering him to acknowledge the charges. He failed to appear yet again. This time, a Bangkok court issued an arrest warrant, but it came too late, or perhaps, critics would say, exactly as late as it was allowed to. Because just days before he was due to face that hearing, Vorayuth left Thailand. He flew out on a private jet. By the time the warrant was active, the man it named was already gone, and he was photographed shortly afterward abroad, including in London, free, mobile, and beyond the reach of the Thai courts. Interpol would later issue a red notice listing the billionaire heir as wanted internationally. But a red notice is a request, not a capture. Vorayuth has remained overseas, his exact whereabouts unknown, ever since. Now here is where the case reveals its cruelest mechanism, and it is a mechanism, not an accident. Under Thai law, criminal charges carry a statute of limitations, a deadline by which the accused must be prosecuted or the charge simply expires. And as Vorayuth stayed away year after year, those deadlines began to arrive. One by one, the charges against him lapsed. The speeding charge expired. The hit-and-run charge expired. Each missed hearing, each year of freedom abroad wasn't just delay. It was the clock running down on the accountability itself. By staying gone long enough, the charges could be made to disappear on their own. 4 of the counts against him died that way, killed not by a verdict, but by the calendar. Only one remained, the most serious, reckless driving causing death, which carries a 15-year limit. That one is set to expire in September 2027. It is worth pausing on how strange and how galling this mechanism is to watch operate. A statute of limitations exists for sound reasons. Evidence degrades, memories fade, and there is a principle that a person should not live forever under the threat of prosecution for an unresolved allegation. But those reasons assume the accused is present and available, and that it is the state that has failed to act in time. This case turned that logic inside out. Here, critics argued, the accused himself was the reason the clock kept running. That the delays, the missed hearings, the years abroad were not the system's failure to prosecute, but a strategy to outlast the very charges. In that reading, the statute of limitations stopped being a protection against an idle state and became, instead, a finish line a fugitive only had to reach. Every birthday spent overseas brought another expiry closer. It is one of the reasons the case has felt, to so many observers, less like justice delayed and more like justice engineered to run out of time. For years, it looked as though the whole thing might simply fade, the charges dwindling, the fugitive settled comfortably abroad, the officer's death receding into an unsolved footnote. And then, in 2020, the case detonated. Documents surfaced revealing that the Office of the Attorney General had at some point quietly issued an order not to prosecute Vorayuth at all. All charges dropped. When that became public, the reaction in Thailand was volcanic. Here was the confirmation of everything people had suspected, that the system had not merely been slow, but had actively worked to let him off entirely. The outcry was so intense that it forced a reckoning. This was not a quiet news cycle. It landed at a moment when many young Thais were already frustrated with entrenched power and the sense that the rules bent for those at the top, and the case became a rallying symbol far beyond the crash itself, proof, in the eyes of protesters and commentators, that impunity was not a conspiracy theory, but a documented reality. #spread. The Red Bull brand itself, a source of enormous national pride and enormous foreign revenue, found its name pulled into the anger, with some calling for boycotts over a scandal attached to the founding family. The pressure was commercial as much as political, and it was impossible to ignore. The prosecutor handling the case resigned in August 2020. Investigations were launched, not just into the crash, but into how the case against a billionaire's grandson had been so thoroughly defanged. And under that pressure, in 2021, prosecutors filed fresh charges against Vorayuth, reviving the case they had tried to bury. The fugitive, of course, was still a fugitive, but the question had now shifted, and it was a bigger question than one man's guilt. The question was, who had helped him? That question became its own criminal case, and this is the part of the story that finally produced people standing in a courtroom, hearing a verdict. In 2024, Thai prosecutors moved against not Vorayuth, but the officials accused of protecting him. 8 people were charged in connection with allegedly mishandling the investigation and altering the case files to help him evade justice. And the specific allegation cut to the very heart of the cover-up, that they had conspired to alter the recorded speed of the Ferrari, to reduce the figure in the official documents so that the speeding element of the case against him would collapse. The 8 were a striking list. They included a former national chief of the Royal Thai Police. They included a former deputy attorney general. They included other police officers, a public prosecutor, a lawyer, and a specialist witness. These were not minor functionaries. This was, allegedly, the machinery of the state itself being turned to shield one wealthy young man. All 8 pleaded not guilty. The case went before the Central Criminal Court for corruption and misconduct cases. Think about what that altered speed allegation actually meant, because it is the mechanical heart of the whole scandal. The original police case put the Ferrari at 177 kilometers per hour, a figure that, if it stood, made the most serious charges almost unarguable. But if that number could be quietly revised downward in the official record, the entire legal picture changed. A lower speed could push the case below the threshold for the gravest charges, or hand the defense room to argue the crash was something closer to an accident than a reckless killing. The allegation, in other words, was not that someone had shredded the file or made evidence vanish in a dramatic way. It was subtler, and if true, more insidious. That a single crucial number, buried in a technical document, had been massaged, and that this small edit could ripple outward until it dissolved the accountability of a billionaire's grandson. That is why the prosecution of these officials mattered so much. It was an attempt to prove that the impunity people sensed was not just a feeling, but a series of concrete, documentable acts. The verdict came on the 22nd of April, 2025, and it was split. 2 of the 8 were found guilty. A former Deputy Attorney General, Nate Naksuk, and a public prosecutor, Chainarong Sangthong Aram, were convicted of violating Thailand's anti-corruption law, the court finding that they had collaborated to alter witness statements and reduce the recorded speed of the Ferrari in the official investigation documents. They were jailed. For the first time in the entire 13-year saga, someone was going to prison because of this case. But the other 6 were acquitted, including the former national police chief, Somyot Phumpanmung, the court citing a lack of evidence linking them to the cover-up. The court ordered all 8 detained pending appeal, though they were later released on bail as the appeals process began. So the outcome was real, but partial. A genuine conviction that pierced for the first time the wall of impunity around the case, and, at the same time, a set of acquittals that showed how hard it remains to pin the whole thing down. And Vorayuth himself? Through all of it, the outcry, the reinstated charges, the trial of the men accused of protecting him, the convictions, he has remained exactly where he has been since 2017. Abroad, a fugitive, his whereabouts unknown, an Interpol red notice hanging over a name attached to one of the largest fortunes on earth. He has never been tried, he has never been convicted, and the last charge that could still bring him to account, reckless driving causing death, is ticking toward its expiry in September 2027. If that deadline passes with him still beyond reach, then the final legal consequence for the death of Police Sgt Maj Wichian Klanprasert may simply cease to exist, dissolved by time the way the others were. Step back, and you can see why this single traffic case became, for so many Thais, something far larger than itself. It is routinely described in Thailand's own media and by observers abroad as the definitive example of a two-tiered justice system, one set of rules for the poor and another for the rich and well-connected. That is not a claim this channel is inventing. It is the widely reported framing of the case within Thailand itself, captured in that grim national saying about who really goes to jail. Whether or not Vorayuth ever did what police allege, the sheer spectacle of the process, the endless delays, the private jet departure, the charges expiring on schedule, the secret order not to prosecute, the altered speed in the files, told the public a story about power that no official denial could erase. The 2025 convictions complicated that story a little. They proved the wall was not entirely impenetrable, but they did not bring the man himself any closer to a courtroom. There is a hard international dimension to that too, worth spelling out. An Interpol red notice is often misunderstood as a global arrest order. It is not. It is a request to law enforcement worldwide to locate and provisionally detain a person pending extradition. Whether anyone acts on it depends on the country the fugitive is in, on that country's treaties with Thailand, and on the political will to enforce them against someone with vast resources and expensive lawyers. A person of enormous wealth has options most fugitives do not. The ability to base themselves in jurisdictions where extradition is slow or unlikely, to contest any attempt through the courts for years, and to keep moving. That is why a red notice can hang over a name for the better part of a decade without ever producing a single handcuff. The reach of the law, in practice, often stops precisely where a large enough fortune begins. In the end, underneath the billions and the Ferraris and the years of legal maneuvering, there is a much smaller and much quieter fact, and it is the one that should not get lost. A 47-year-old police officer named Wichian Klanprasert went to work one night in September 2012, and he did not come home. He left behind a family. He was a public servant, killed on a public road, and for 13 years his death has been the axis around which one of the most infamous scandals in modern Thai history has turned. It is easy, in a story this big, to let him become an abstraction, the officer, the victim, the reason for the scandal. But he was a working man doing a modest, dangerous job in the dark hours when most people are asleep. The kind of officer who keeps a city running and is almost never noticed until something goes wrong. Whatever the courts eventually decide, or fail to decide, about the man in the Ferrari, nothing changes the simple arithmetic at the bottom of it all. One family lost a father and a husband, and more than a decade later they are still waiting to see whether the law will ever finish what it started. Two men have now gone to prison in connection with the effort to bury his case. The man police say was driving the car that killed him has gone skiing, shopping, and globetrotting, photographed free in foreign cities, while the clock on the last charge quietly counts down. That is where the case sits today. Not closed, not resolved, just waiting for an arrest that may never come, or for a deadline in 2027 that could end the matter without a single day of the accused's accountability. And if that day comes and goes, the most unsettling part is how ordinary it will seem. No dramatic verdict, no final reckoning, just a date on a calendar passing quietly, and a name that was wanted around the world becoming, overnight, a name that can never be tried. If this case stayed with you, tell me in the comments what you think happens when that deadline arrives. We cover cases from Thailand and across Southeast Asia, carefully and from the record every week. If that's the kind of storytelling you want more of, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.